From the Bench podcast. This is episode 3. We're here live from the beautiful John W. Lindsay YMCA. We are 550 meters away from the home of the Halifax Mooseheads at the Scotiabank Centre. We're across the street from the Canadian Premier League, the Halifax Wanderers. And today we have a sponsorship from Full of Taste. They're a small business, local business from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. They support natural, homemade, and sugar-free and organic products from their website. Feel free to check out the link in the description below.
Beautiful. So episode 3 live from the Y. We have a bunch of stuff to talk about, and this is a very special episode because we're here live in the same room. These guys convinced me to drive from the boonies into Halifax to record with them. So super excited, and thank you to our sponsor. I think that's fantastic, considering we're new at this. We're fresh at this. So to have a sponsor is pretty cool. So definitely check them out. Local businesses are always fantastic, especially if you are local here in Nova Scotia like us. So, guys, the first thing on the list is Stanley Cup playoffs. I think everybody is still talking about the playoffs, unless you're one of the 30 teams that didn't make the Stanley Cup Finals. So,
there's that.
So basically, nobody's talking about it. But I want to go over and I want to kind of recap what happened, because it was a historic Stanley Cup Final from most angles.
Super memorable.
Yeah, absolutely. From a team winning its first Stanley Cup to almost a reverse sweep. What are your guys' thoughts?
It was a great battle, I think, between Edmonton and Florida. Hence why I'm wearing the Florida hat today, ladies and gentlemen. I think Sergei Bobrovsky played very well. You know, I wish he won the Vezina, but again, another goalie has won it. Pretty honestly. That's a whole different topic.
That's for being good in the regular season.
In the regular season, but I do think Florida played very well. They had their downs, obviously, to see Edmonton almost did make a big comeback. Would have been the first time ever that happened, but Florida tends to shut that door. So I think personally, motivational-wise, I think Florida Panthers kind of deserve that win. It's their first time winning the Stanley Cup. So
but not the first time for the state of Florida. Not by a long shot, really. No, it was an intense series, and I think seeing Edmonton come back from 3 down to tie it, to send it to a Game 7, let alone to put up a fight and have a shot at it. I mean, it was exciting. It was fun to see, and congrats to Florida. There's nothing like winning your first Stanley Cup. I'm a Canes fan. That was one of my favorite moments of my childhood, was seeing them win in 2006. So I think that Florida definitely earned it. They were one of the best teams all season. They were one of the best teams last season, and there's probably not a more deserving coach than Paul Maurice to lead his team there. And what a squad. I mean, they were stacked from top to bottom. And they had a lot of guys with a lot of personality. And it kind of it really was like a Miami team. So I don't know if you guys saw much of the parade, but it was kind of cool to see, even though the weather wasn't amazing. There was a decent turnout, maybe not what you hope for when you win a Stanley Cup, but considering it was a terrible weather day in Sunrise, Florida, and to see the team in interacting, I guess is what I'm trying to say, with all the fans, Bobrovsky hopping off the float or whatever, and carrying the cup down by the fans, and Aaron Ekblad, who's a guy that I don't know if there's a more underrated defenseman currently in the NHL that's as good as that. Nobody talks about him anymore since a couple of years after his draft. Everybody kind of forgets about him. But he had kind of a fun moment as well. He stood there and he got to tell Brooks Koepka to basically go fuck himself. I don't know if you guys saw that part of it or not, but that was my favorite part of the entire Stanley Cup Finals. Seeing Florida win and seeing Aaron Ekblad get to kind of stick it to another athlete, because I don't think anybody, including the hockey world, expected Florida to really ever be a Stanley Cup winner, despite the fact that they've been good for years now. Their history has not been that of a winning club. So
honestly, I would say just my overview of it, exciting finals. I felt like I knew by Game 5, Edmonton's dragging this to 7. But the thing I noticed that happened in Game 7 was just Florida was much tougher team. That toughness, indeed, that's really what I think led to that victory. But I love what they did as a team. The whole series, I mean, it's one of those, I'll never forget this playoff run. This was one of those
historic,
forever gonna live in my memories, just because it was so exciting to watch. There were lots of moments where you gasped, you couldn't believe what you were seeing. So one of those, privileged to have that. And I heard the viewership numbers on that, highest watched Stanley Cup Finals in like a long time.
I think it's been trending in that direction, though. I think viewership's been going up in the league. I mean, when you've got two of the best players in the NHL on one team making their deepest cup run in their careers so far, I mean, it was incredible. Watching Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl perform at that level was amazing. And on some level somewhere, Edmonton's not as good as Florida, right? They're not as good all the way through their lineup. Sure, they have better high-end talent and things like that, but, you know, Bobrovsky is a $10 million goaltender.
Yeah.
Skinner's not.
Yeah.
You know? And you start to look at guys like Warren Fogle who are contributing in the finals for Edmonton. That's a grinded-out physical hockey player who is coming at the right time and putting in the right goals. I mean, I think Edmonton did everything except win Game 7 to make it a storied run. Like they were literally a couple of goals away from being Stanley Cup champions, and they would have been probably the least deep team to win the Cup in the last couple of years. When you look at last year's, so Florida this year, last year was Vegas. Like these teams have been stacked hockey teams for the last few years. It's kind of the Vegas model. And I don't mean, sorry, Edmonton fans, like your team is amazing, but really rely on two guys to drive the team, and the fact that they were getting contributions throughout the lineup, it doesn't go unnoticed, right? Like they don't win a trophy for coming in second. They don't get to go home and have a parade. They don't get to hang a banner, saying that they came in second, because nobody wants to see that. But the future's bright. Like if you can do that with what I consider a top half blue line, but not a top 5 blue line, and you do that with depth signings that really are their budget signings, so that you can keep your McDavid and your Draisaitl and stuff like that. If they can keep their team together, they could be a Stanley Cup contender in the next couple of years. Not a contender, sorry. They could be a Stanley Cup champion in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I like to kind of touch bases on Stuart Skinner there. As a former goalie, I can see from Game 3, as you've seen Bobrovsky kind of fall down. Could have been a bit of a motivational thing, a little bit of pure pressure, as you can probably take from being in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But I think Stuart Skinner played amazing. I don't want to cut him out of the picture here. He's going to be a world-class goalie at one point. You can just tell just the way he presents himself.
I hope so.
How he gets back down, comes back up, bring in the...
He's a hometown boy.
Hometown boy.
My concern is lots of goalies can be good in short bursts.
100%. We've seen that happen.
Goaltending is I think, the hardest position in the NHL. And it's the hardest to be consistent at. I mean, Bobrovsky's a $10 million goaltender, and he hasn't been an example of consistency. I don't think there is or has been an example of consistency since Martin Brodeur left the NHL. Because goaltending is not a science. And that's why some teams prioritize it, some teams don't. I think most teams look at it like you need to have league average goaltending. And I'm only saying all this because, I really hope Skinner looked like a grade A goaltender in the playoffs. And you drag your team basically back from 3-0 along with the two best players potentially in the NHL, and you deserve some recognition. I just hope that he doesn't slump back down.
That's exactly the point that I wanted to get across. I think Skinner, in the long term, will be Edmonton's future. I would hope they stick with Skinner in the near future as well.
In the near term, I don't think there's a better option.
I think you see all the goalies now. Like we have Swayman, who's still a free agent right now, and he's not signed. It'd be a nice fit to go to Edmonton.
He'll stay in Boston.
I would guess he's still in Boston. The price is right, but Skinner in the long term, I think that's Edmonton's number one for maybe another 5 years.
I think, barring some unforeseen, which goaltending is unpredictable, but that would be the plan. If you're setting up if you're the new GM of the Edmonton Oilers, that's what you're thinking. I think we're bleeding into free agency talk, so we might as well hop into talk about free agency. And the first thing I want to do, it's a little bit different than what we had talked about going into this, but Draisaitl needs a new contract. not this year, but he needs it before next year. And they need to balance that in Edmonton with having Connor McDavid on the team and needing to sign other players.
Yeah.
We see what Toronto, it's happened in Toronto with the core four and how they can't get over the hump because they're so top heavy. I think Toronto fans will probably have a million reasons, and some Toronto fans will say it's not the core four's fault, but it's the budgeting. But there's other guys that need a new contract before then too. I mean, Sidney Crosby potentially needs a new contract. Sometime this season, or else the risk is that he could become what Steven Stamkos became this year and become a casualty of either a team moving on, which is unlikely with Crosby, but he could be enticed to go somewhere where he could win another Stanley Cup. Because there are teams that are taking more steps in that direction than Pittsburgh is currently. So let's talk about Draisaitl. Did they get it done in Edmonton?
I think so. I think Edmonton will figure a way with keeping Connor McDavid, keeping the 1-2 punch going. When there's a will, there's a way. But I don't see Draisaitl going anywhere else. I think he's set in stone to go. But again, price has to be right.
I mean, could we be looking at $13.5, $14 million for this guy?
You could be aiming around that, but I don't think it's going to be a very long deal.
Or does he take
I was going to say,
it'd be a short-term deal. I don't think anything past 5. You're probably going to stay below 4.
Is that the player's decision?
It might be. I don't think he would stay in Edmonton longer than 5 years. I can maybe see a 3 or 4.
So I'm going to be honest.
I was going to say 3.
We're talking about this. Like I haven't gone out and listened to what like Frank Saravelli and whoever else is saying about it. My gut tells me that if you sign Draisaitl, you sign him to 8 years. And if you don't sign him to 8 years, you move him.
Yeah.
And you get something back for that asset. Because why would he want a 4-year contract?
I think the way you got to look at it is that they had the big push. I think in 8 years, you could see a rebuild in Edmonton again. And that wouldn't be moving Connor, it would be building more pieces around Connor while having less of that cap. So you're going to have Connor, you're going to have Draisaitl for the 3 to 4 year term on a decent minimum or a decent high. And then if he has that decision to stay longer, he'd probably sign another 2-3 year to give it another chance. But I think to be safe with Edmonton, I wouldn't go 8.
So I completely disagree. I think the player and the team both want as much term as they can possibly get on that deal. If you don't have Draisaitl, it's a different team. And you risk losing him at some point for nothing in UFA, right? Like Steven Stamkos just walked away from Tampa. I guess you could argue that freed up cap space to bring in Jake Gensel. But I'd rather have Stamkos and Jake Gensel,
100%.
I guess is what I'm saying. I'd rather have McDavid and Draisaitl, not just one of them.
No, definitely.
Draisaitl, I mean, if he signs a 4-year contract, is his value the same after 4 years? Does his value go up? I mean, he's now close to 30, right? Like he's getting there. He's not an old player, but he's in his prime now.
Yes. Yeah.
So take the 8-year deal. You know you're not going to be worth whatever that price tag is in 6 years.
Yeah.
But you're still going to be getting paid for it. And whatever team brings you in, they're hoping for a Stanley Cup or 2 now, not in 6 years. I don't know. I think in order to stay in Edmonton, it needs to be a long-term commitment from the team to the player. And I think if it's not there, I think they find a return for him that is massive. In the range of multiple first-round picks and multiple players.
Yeah.
Probably roster and prospect, but multiple pieces.
Yeah.
Massive deal. He would be the biggest player to be traded since, I don't know, in the 90s, Philadelphia traded for Lindros.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest trade since Lindros. I mean, like, we're talking about a superstar, not just a star, not just a good player. We're not talking about a complimentary piece. We're talking about a guy that is like the Evgeny Malkin of his generation.
Yeah.
And does he want to be Evgeny Malkin? Does he want to be a number 2 to Connor his entire career? I don't know. So, so maybe there is something to a short-term deal. I tend to think if you're sticking with Draisaitl, then you want him long term. You want him as part of that foundation. You want him as part of the building. You want him to teach the future players what they are, and you worry about moving a bad contract later, like every other NHL team seems to do pretty much. I mean, most teams worry about the bad contract when it turns bad. They don't worry about it on July 1st.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's my take. There is a similar situation out there. We mentioned Crosby.
Yeah.
Does he sign an extension to stay with Pittsburgh? I think I think he wants to be like a Pittsburgh Penguin for life. But how good would he look somewhere else in the league?
It'd be fun to see. I think that's the thing, but more so Crosby than Draisaitl. I see Crosby just staying put. I think being a Penguin for life does mean something to him. Where I think Draisaitl's maybe a little more curious and will probably test the market a lot more. I don't know what would move the needle for Crosby on wanting to shift out of Pittsburgh, but I see him staying, and personally, I see Draisaitl going.
Fair. I mean, maybe that's a possibility. I think with Crosby, the question for me is, does he want another Stanley Cup, or does he feel that he's good at 3? He's won 3 cups.
Well, that's sort of it.
He's won a gold medal. He's scored the golden goal. I mean, maybe he feels that there's nothing left to achieve other than being a career Penguin.
Yeah.
But maybe he also looks at it and says, I really want one more.
Yeah. There's so many pieces you can do with Sidney Crosby. I think, personally speaking, he will retire as a Penguin. But you can look at those teams that are ready to build that can use Crosby. Example, Montreal's balling up. His father was a draft pick to Montreal Canadiens, favorite team growing up.
Yeah.
Maybe he goes over there to honor his father in some ways. Maybe he'll go to a team like Nashville, for an example. Just throwing hypotheticals.
He'd have to live in Montreal if he wanted to play for. I'm joking. It's a fantastic city.
You got to take a look at Nashville. Nashville's building up. They're looking like a Stanley Cup contending team. So would you want to take the risk and move and win another cup?
Well, if you're
That's
Crosby,
a little town.
maybe you say, hey, look, I will gladly take a cheap deal on 1 year to win a cup.
No, exactly.
We've seen guys do it in the past. It used to be a thing that the guys in their last third or the last quarter of their career, they would kind of chase cups. Ron Francis was dealt from Carolina to Toronto in 2004 to chase a Stanley Cup. Go chase a cup, right? Because Carolina had been out of the playoffs for 2 years. Or maybe it was 2003. I apologize. Yeah. But the point being, guys used to do it a lot more. I don't know that we see it as frequently anymore. The money's bigger, so you're not as concerned. Maybe with those bonuses and making a few extra dollars and stuff before your career's over. I'm not sure. I feel like maybe guys are just set up a little bit better, so they're not chasing that. Yeah. But it'll be interesting, and I'd love to hear what everybody thinks out there. Yeah. So if you're watching and you're thinking, you guys are completely full of shit, let me know. I mean, does Crosby stay or does he walk? Does Draisaitl stay? Does he walk? I tend to think they both stay where they are. That's what I think.
Makes the most sense to me.
I think split.
Yeah, fair. You think Draisaitl walks?
Yeah, Crosby stays.
Fair enough. All right, so let's talk a few other teams here. You mentioned Nashville, Ethan. Nashville made moves.
That's what you call a predator, not Drake. I had to bring that out there. I had that written in my script.
No Diddy.
Diddy, just all Drake.
Yeah, I mean, they predated the NHL free agency this year, and definitely that guy just waved at us. I don't know if you can hear us.
I know.
Welcome everybody. This is what happens when you get a live show. Predators went ham. They went apeshit.
Man.
Yeah.
They took everybody.
Yeah.
They took 3 of the top 5 free agents.
Did you want me to start listing these?
Yeah, might as well.
So they did a re-sign. UC Saros, 8 years. Brady Sajak, 7 years. Steven Stamkos on a 4-year. Jonathan Marchessault from the Vegas Golden Knights going to the Predators on a 5-year contract, and again re-signing Ryan O'Reilly.
Yeah, good job. It's one of those. What an incredible. Those are just amazing signings. Like, I just can't believe Nashville went that ham. What do you guys think? I mean, I don't even have a crazy ton to say because it's just like, good job. Like,
I didn't expect that happening. I think, personally speaking, I had a rumor hearing the Stamkos was on the move. I know Tampa Bay, I don't think give them the best.
I'm not even sure if
there.
I heard Nashville linked to that though until it
I
happened.
don't know.
Maybe I
It
just
just-
forgetting, but
I was, as a Leafs fan, you always hear Stamkos Leafs would be the
Yes.
dream, like John Tavares to the Leafs was the dream. But
that's the dream for Leafs fans. It's not the
As a
dream
Leafs
of
fan.
players.
That's
I
the
think.
thing.
I knew
Right?
Stamkos wasn't becoming a Leaf, which I'm kind of glad it didn't happen.
If
But
you're a
for him-
hometown boy,
yeah,
Toronto, I don't think it's that appealing.
no.
I think it's more appealing if you're from a team, a market. Like let's say, geez, I'm trying to think of a player that makes sense here. Okay, so let's say that Omaha, Nebraska had a team. They don't, but let's say they're an expansion team, and Jake Gensel all of a sudden has an option to go home. Well, that might make sense, right? Make an impact. It's a new franchise. It's your hometown team. They've never won a cup, whatever.
Yeah.
Toronto has a history.
Yeah.
And what are the odds that, even 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now, that anybody remembers the John Tavares era in Toronto? They didn't win a cup.
Nope.
Well,
They didn't make it past the first round more than once.
Yeah.
So what are the odds that you remember John Tavares and all those signings and stuff? So not that guys look at it, I don't think everything's about legacy necessarily and being that guy that is the face of a franchise. But do you want to go and take all the criticism, pay the higher taxes? And yes, there's ways to not pay taxes in Canada and stuff like that. But do you want to deal with that, or you want to go to a team where the weather's better, the media's better, the fans are less angry, and the pressure's like it exists, but it's not like a pressure cooker of unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Which I think this is a good move for Steven Stamkos because he's been in Tampa Bay Lightning for a long time. Will probably retire his number in Tampa Bay, which makes the most sense.
oh yeah.
They might retire to
Without a
both
doubt.
places by the time it's by the time his
Exactly.
career's done.
So I just think personally this is a nice little hidden gem for Steven Stamkos. I think this just helps his career a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it does too. And Stamkos is a guy that, for anybody who remembers the kind of mid 2000s and 2010s, Stammers was a guy that was Crosby-esque, John Tavares-esque. And he still is an incredible centerman, an incredible winger if he plays wing. He's probably a better winger than he is centerman, but he's a great hockey player, and he scores goals, and he's electric. The only issue with Stamkos over his career has been injuries, and he seems to be past that point of his career. Like, he hasn't had major injuries in a while. But yet, Tampa Bay moved on from him, and they're still in a contention window.
Yep.
So this kind of leads me into asking a question. Did Tampa Bay do enough by bringing in Jake Gensel but letting their captain walk? Is that a wash, or did they improve? Are they worse? I know what I think. So give me and Ethan a little bit to work off of here, because to me it's an odd move. But.
It's super is an odd move. I think, personally speaking, if I was Steven Stamkos, I could put myself in his shoes, I would feel a little offended because you let me go, didn't offer me half of a decent contract. You let me move to a city again, a great city.
Can you remind me what his deal was? His deal was $8 million cap hit, right?
Yeah.
4 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then you moved me to, I moved myself to Nashville now to potentially win a Stanley Cup, where I still could have done that in Tampa Bay. I think they've done enough to bring Jake Gensel to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I kind of think they broke even, but they just lost a little respect for me, losing Steven Stamkos.
Yeah, I think they broke even on paper.
Yeah.
But I think losing your captain that way is baffling.
Yeah.
Like it's not a John Tavares situation where John Tavares seemingly wanted to go to Toronto and the money was there on the table and stuff like that. It's a different situation. All of the reporting going into free agency was that Stammers was going to sign a cheap deal, like a pretty team-friendly deal with Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
I think Tampa could have made it work to keep Stammers and bring in Gensel.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe they had to do that to give Gensel what he wanted, because he ended up with an 8-year, $9 million deal or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that you lose your captain, you lose a part of your team, and that's a team that has won multiple Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of it has to do with Stamkos. He was injured for, I think, one of the Cups, but he has been there for all of them, and he is the face of the team. I don't know that Kucherov is as consistent as Stammers in terms of how he plays. He puts up a lot of points,
Yeah.
but when you get to the playoffs, Stammers can play the center, he can play the wing, Stammers can play with anybody in your lineup.
Yep.
He's also the guy in the locker room that's going to have the words and the things to say. He's been on Team Canada. He's won big games. He's done his whole career. I think it's a big loss. And I think Jake Gensel's a great player. As a Hurricanes fan, it sucks to lose Jake Gensel.
Yeah.
But I do think that, I think there's a reason there. I think Carolina made a lot of mistakes. Put all their eggs in one basket. But anyways, I don't know. To me, they Tampa's a wash on paper, but Nashville won free agency.
Yeah, I also want to throw out just another player. Jonathan Marchessault leaving the Vegas Golden Knights to go to the Nashville Predators.
Is he not an original Golden Knight?
He is the last one.
No, Mark Stone.
Mark Stone's still there.
And
Mark
they still
Stone.
have a defenseman or two, don't they? Maybe not.
Well, Mark Stone was a re-sign. Besides the Stanley Cup winning, Marchessault was the only one that came from the expansion draft.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a lot of turnover on that team.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They moved so much goaltender in the last few years. We remember 2 years ago, Vegas used every single goaltender in the goaltending pool.
Yeah,
We've seen goalies from the East Coast Hockey League even played for the Vegas Golden Knights. So shout out to you guys.
Well, they had some injuries too, though, right?
A lot of injuries, but Jonathan Marchessault came in at the expansion draft to the Vegas Golden Knights. Yeah. I think he left. I think it was in Florida. Was it?
He was in Florida when that happened.
He left in Florida.
They didn't leave. He was selected. I mean, Florida exposed him in the entry draft.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then goes to Vegas, does amazing. I think there might be one last Vegas outstanding. I think that's William Karlsson. I think he's still a Golden Knight.
I think so too. That's why I'm thinking there's still one or two guys that are still
So,
original.
Jonathan Marchessault now moves to Nashville
Yeah.
after winning a Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights. They're still a contender. How does that make you feel knowing you just won a Stanley Cup? You were the heart in that team photo. Now you move on.
So one, I don't think Vegas is the same type of contender that they have been in the past. I think they're a good team. They're a top-notch team. I don't put them in the top 3 or 4 teams in the league next year. Same as Carolina. Carolina's not a contender next year.
Okay.
Carolina is a playoff team.
Yep.
They're not a contender anymore. They lost too much.
Yeah.
Vegas has a really good team, but now the team that's there hasn't won a Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
Right? There's very few guys that are left there that won, and that was 2 years ago. Like this was not really a full year. It was not a long time ago.
Yeah.
But Vegas is always competitive.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you let that guy go. I think what sucks the most is for the fans in Vegas who, I mean, who do you buy? If you're a Vegas Golden Knights fan, you're not putting a name on a jersey.
Yeah. At this point, no. I made that mistake with a Fleury jersey.
And maybe it's, it's cool, like whatever, I had it for the moment, but like they don't have loyalty to their players. Yeah. They have loyalty to winning, and they will go after anybody that will help them win. And I respect it on one level, but I'm also a guy that looks at fan favorites. Like when I was growing up, a lot of my favorite players were not the superstars.
Yeah.
They were the Jesse Bollerises of the team that might go out and do the scrapping and the big hitting, and that's who I liked a lot. And those were the guys that were with the team for 7-8 years because they were cheap.
Yeah.
How do you feel if you're Jonathan Marchessault? I don't know. I mean, I'd feel pretty good going to Nashville right now.
I would.
That's the thing, right? Like I'd be like, oh, it kind of sucks. Vegas is a cool city. I probably really liked it there. I don't know what his opinion was. I assume he liked it.
No.
But Nashville's also a cool city. Like you're talking about a music city. You're talking about a city with nightlife, a city with film and TV industry. I mean, it's kind of like a Vegas light, right? There's a lot of stuff in Nashville. It's just like a more conservative Vegas.
Yeah, just a bit more cowboy boots.
Yeah, I mean, there's just less gambling and more Grand Ole
hakutua.
Opry, more hakutua. Which makes me think of Off Topic. There's a new Eminem album today, everybody. Go listen to Slim's new album. But and you'll know why when you listen to like the first song. That made me think of it. But again, sorry, you got a live. We wanted to do a live episode, so people get what they get. But I don't know. Jonathan Marchessault, celebrate going to Vegas, leaving Vegas. Celebrate going to a city and a team that will probably value you a little bit more as a guy, as a hockey player, and as a team member, and maybe bring a Stanley Cup there for the first time. Nashville's a team that has been on the cusp before, and they always seem to be competitive for the last 5 or 6 years. Like they're always in the mix for a playoff spot at bare minimum in what used to be a pretty competitive Central Division, and still has some competitive teams in it.
And, yeah, Nashville's always been that team that always had great goaltender.
Great
too.
goaltending,
Great
solid
goaltending line.
defense.
Always.
But they were never a fancy team with big names.
Yeah, no.
Like, you know,
just consistent.
They brought in PK Subban, and that was a big deal. Because it was a flashier move. It was like a different move for them. And I think now they're really leaning in. I mean, Trotz is... Man.
Yeah.
I didn't think he was GM material, but...
That's a team you want to play right now.
They got a good team. You want to play in Nashville right now, and the weather's good, so why not?
Exactly.
Right? Like you're far enough south that you don't really have winter, and I just want to read some of the names. I mean, even their depth signings like Vinny Hinostroza, right? He's been around.
Yep.
He's played lots of minutes in the NHL. Matt Murray as a backup goaltender. I mean,
just to clarify, not Matt Murray.
No, there's two Matt Murrays. This is the 26-year-old Matt Murray who has a lot of potential, I think, to maybe someday even be a starter in the NHL. A lot of guys don't hit their stride until 28 as a goalie.
And that Matt Murray came from the Dallas system. It's just
That's
Dallas
right.
is full of a goaltending
That's
line.
right.
There's no room there. And
They've also got Scott Wedgwood. I mean, they've got a 3-goalie system now in Nashville, which I think is what you need. Alexander Carrier, fantastic. UC Saros, Brady Shea, Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault. I mean, holy moly.
I think
Quality.
I think they're ready. It's going to be a great little season to watch to see what they're going to do, especially midway through.
Look,
you can see trades happening.
I wouldn't want to sign Brady Shea to 7 years, $7 million. He's 30 years old.
Yeah.
At 37, he will not be the same Brady Shea he is today.
Yeah.
But Brady Shea is dynamite right now. Brady Shea is one of the most underrated defensemen.
Yeah.
He's not Aaron Ekblad underrated, but he's underrated.
Oh, I understand.
He did amazing in Carolina. He drove tons of offense. And just his skating ability and his passing ability, he's a guy that can move the puck, and he's a guy that can play in your power play. He can play in your PK. He can do it all. But I give him 4 years of that 7-year contract of being useful to the team.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to figure out what to do with $7 million of a guy that probably can't play in your top 6 anymore.
Yeah.
Especially with like the speed, the level that he plays at. How many defensemen make it to 37 and are still worth $7 million?
Yeah.
Right? I don't think many, but I think the hope there is that the cap goes up.
Yeah.
But what's amazing is Brady Shea is going to make more money than Jonathan Marchessault. Over more term. Marchessault got 5 years at $5.5 million. He is 33, but I think a guy like Marchessault could stick around in your bottom. Like, he could play until he's 40 and just be one of those, like, pop the puck in the net type of guys.
Yeah.
And I think he's got the wheels to play fast for a while still. Like, I don't think he's slowing down. He doesn't play like a 33-year-old when I watch Jonathan Marchessault play.
No.
And who else here? I mean, Saros gets a huge extension. That's maybe less risky, but he'll also be 37 at the end of this contract.
Yeah.
So, look, Nashville they're gonna win now, like in the next 5 years scenario.
Yeah.
Just by the contracts line.
After that 5 years, they're going to be in rough shape. But I think they're the clear winner of free agency this year.
100%.
Like, we're going to talk about a couple more teams, but it's hard to not bring up Nashville and not acknowledge how good they did. I mean, 4 major signings. 4. And really, if you want... I said 3 out of the top 5 free agents. They have 4 out of the top 5 if UC Saros would have made it to free agency. Like, that's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. And last year, they were like a budget team. Like, they weren't at the cap floor, but they were not. What did they bring in? Ryan O'Reilly or something like that. And, it was they moved some guys, and you could tell that Trotz was going to make some changes.
Yeah.
But, man, I'm scared to play Nashville this year.
I just want to throw out one little thing for Nashville before we move on. Nashville's development pool, they have a goaltender in the AHL.
Yes, they do.
Outrageous. And I want to shout out to LaRue. He used to play for the Halifax Mooseheads. He actually was their top goal scorer in the playoffs, who could be potentially coming up to that lineup.
Very nice, very nice. I actually kind of want to talk junior hockey or major junior hockey at a moment here down the road. We'll get there because I think there's some CHL stuff that's kind of fun, and some CHL stuff that's not so fun.
Yeah.
But anyways. So, moving on in free agency, I want to talk about Utah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Utah's a team that, as far as I'm concerned, they made some big ads. They no longer look like the Arizona Coyotes and how they run the team. I was a little worried that they were bringing the whole front office over from Arizona. But I think the owner has more to do with these teams than we give a lot of credit to. Unless you're the Rangers, Boston, Toronto and Montreal, your owner has a lot to say with the team.
Yep.
And these clearly, I mean, in Carolina, we saw when Tom Dundon come in, people can call Carolina cheap all they want, but Carolina just has a salary structure, and they're willing to spend for the right pieces. Like they were there with looking for Jake Gensel the whole time, and I think Utah's a team that is doing the same thing. Like under their ownership, they're willing to spend money. It's not about finding bargains. It's not about taking on bad deals so they can hit the cap floor. This is a team that wants to make the playoffs. Do you want to read through some of their signings, Ethan?
I will read a few. So before the little, the Tucson is also being relocated from what I'm aware of.
They're going to Reno, I think.
Yeah. So,
but it's still owned by Morello, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so that part's still owned by
I bet the AHL is wishing they could also get rid of him.
Yeah. I think Tucson,
Possibly.
from what I'm hearing, Tucson is also one of the highest attending AHL teams. They move really well there. But Igor Slokov, he came from the Belleville Senators.
Sokolov. These Russian names, we're going to have fun with because
100%.
I'm going to correct them and Ethan's going to butcher them.
100%. That's also my speech impediment. He also is a former Cape Breton Stream. We need to go.
Yes.
Braden Hayden, he just signed another 2-year. I think it's a two-way as
He was
well.
a draft pick by them a couple of years ago, was he not?
First round, yes.
Yeah.
We have Ian Cole also stepping in the line.
I'm sorry. I got to say this about Ian Cole. Utah? Okay, everybody in Utah and anybody on the broadcast team in Utah, make sure if you have any women on the broadcast team, keep them away from Ian Cole, okay? We learned in Carolina, Ian Cole's a home wrecker. We're keeping that in the podcast.
There it is.
No, we're saying one more thing. Ian Cole, fuck you.
Next on the list, Valimaki. I think he's a Finnish player going into the lineup. I think he played for the Dallas Stars. What's it, Valimaki?
Valimaki did. So Valimaki is somebody that I think has been around. He's definitely been in the, Utah, Arizona system for a bit.
He got traded to Arizona, but he's also from, I think it was Dallas Stars or something along those lines.
You're asking
I
me a
remember
question
having him on NHL 20. He was my top defenseman then.
I remember when he came into the league, and I remember him being a highly touted prospect. He's still an RFA. He's still young.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, he's more of a when he came into the league, he was very much a run and gun type of defenseman, kind of a two-way, but more of an offensive flair guy.
Yeah. And we have another local boy from Halifax, Liam O'Brien, big tuna, spicy tuna.
This guy's a beast.
He's that guy where you kind of like Toronto for a second. You have Ryan Reeves, you have the guy who's going to be hitting your bodies. Maybe a little bit less of that, which is great because you don't want to be in the box all the time.
Yeah, no, he's not Matt Rempe.
No, he will knock your lights out, but he will play physical and he won't kill you.
But he also plays hockey.
Exactly.
He's a centerman, so he's not just out there to throw hits. He's going to take faceoffs.
Exactly.
He's good defensively, right? I mean, he's not the guy you're going to rely on for everything, but he can play in your bottom six, so he can take on penalty killing minutes. And he's a guy that, when you're skating in with the puck and you see this guy standing there, you're going to think twice before you try to skate through him.
No, exactly.
He's that kind of player. He's a little bit intimidating, but like I said, he's not Matt Rempe, who's out there training in the offseason for fighting instead of scoring goals.
I think this is another great pickup for Liam O'Brien going to Utah.
Yeah.
I think that's a good move. You don't need a Matt Rempe. You don't need a Ryan Reeves. You need this guy. He's going to put the puck in the net. That's all you need.
There's no room for those guys anymore. There's a salary cap, and teams that are paying those guys are paying money to players that can't play outside of your bottom six. Maybe not outside of your bottom line.
Yeah.
Right? So there's just not, even with the cap going up, I don't think most teams want to spend the money on that, which I want to talk about Matt Rempe, but we'll get there.
And then the last kind of pick is a little bit of a small one, is Matthew Villalta. He's an OHL top goaltender of the year at one point with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. Gets picked up again to go to Utah. I think that's another good pickup for them in their system. So
absolutely. And a lot of these guys are young, like 25 or younger.
I think the number is 27 and under,
Yeah, I mean, so like I'm looking at Patrick Koch, 27 years old, Liam O'Brien, 29.
We got Ian Cole at 35. But
Kevin Stenlund at 27, Kevin Connaughton, 34. Everybody else, Augustino at 33. Pretty much everybody else is under 25 years old. So those are good ads or good, bringing guys back. I think they're a team that is going to look at the trade market, and they're going to try to bring in a high-scoring winger or a real first-line centerman. I think they're going to be looking for something along those lines.
They picked up Sergachev, which is a
did.
big shocker in my eyes. I know we talked about Tampa a little while ago, about Steven Stamkos leaving, and Sergachev now going to Utah. I think it's a great move for Utah. That brings another star in the line. Again, Sergachev also had his injury. I think he broke his fibula or something like that.
I forget what the injury was, but there was an injury involved. And so there's some questions, right? Whenever a guy has an injury like that.
But I think that's a great move for them, especially it's going to take them away from the high-intensity core team that Tampa Bay is to now relax, play a little bit more healthier, and play your game.
Yeah, I don't think there's the pressure in Utah to be a contender every year like there is in Tampa Bay. John Cooper is a Rod Brindamore-esque coach. This is what we demand, and anything short of that, you're not on the roster. We've got guys that want to play, and we'd rather take a guy from the AHL that wants to play it his ass off before we'll take a guy that thinks he can coast through.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not saying Sergachev's that guy, but there's been injuries and things like that where maybe he hasn't been able to fully get back to himself because of the demands of the franchise. And I'm not saying that Tampa does it wrong, but you want to be part of that team. You want to be on the ice for a team like Tampa Bay every game because it's an exciting team and they're going places. And they have a chance to win every game, every night against any opponent.
Yeah.
I think in Utah, the expectations are lower. So a guy like Sergachev that went from high pressure to high pressure, right? He went from Montreal to Tampa Bay. Now he's in Utah, new NHL club. So there's a lot more fun attached to this than there is pressure. If you make the playoffs there, it's like, whoa, this is awesome. Versus of course we made the playoffs, but we lost in the first round or second round. So I'm excited for Utah. I think those young guys are good. I think bringing in a guy like Sergachev, he's going to age with the team where in 5 or 6 years when he's hitting his stride as a defenseman, which he's good now, but defensemen kind of age into it, they're going to be a team that is going to be terrifying with the prospect pool that they have. I mean, if you turn a third of their prospects that they have into NHL players, you got a heck of a team someday.
Especially a lot of their draft picks look to be a lot of
first
and second rounds.
They've had
those
and
around.
they still have draft picks stocked. So as bad as Morello was as an owner of an NHL team, Utah's in a very good position. In fact, I would go as far as to say that Ryan Smith got a hell of a steal on that franchise.
He got the right team.
It's way better than an expansion team. Sure, an expansion team, you get certain players, but look at how Seattle was built.
Exactly.
Seattle's not nearly as good as Vegas. Vegas is incredible. Then the other 30 teams figured out, okay, this is how we avoid losing so much talent to a team like Vegas. We don't make the trades and we don't try to protect players. We just give them the list. And they pick from the list. And with the Vegas expansion, you guys remember there was trade after trade after trade to say, don't take this guy, so we'll give you this guy. And there were lots of prospects sent over to Vegas and stuff that they flipped for draft picks, better players, whatever, and eventually built up a team that was they went to the Stanley Cup Finals in year one or Western Conference, whatever it was. So I don't mean to go on a tangent. That's kind of how I roll sometimes. But I'm seeing Utah as a club that, they're way better than what the expansion version would have been. And they're maybe a year away from being a serious playoff team. This year, maybe a bit of a question mark. Do they make the playoff? Do they not? But I think as early as next year, depending on trades and other signings and things that they do, how the team is managed in its first season, I think they could be looking at being in the playoffs and being a good team when they finally unveil their official final jersey and logo.
Yeah. And I think we can speak as if we were hockey players to this day playing the NHL. And you just take a look at Utah, how well they're building it off the community and how well the owner is. You kind of want to play in Utah a little bit.
It's exciting.
It's also a hockey state. People don't realize how far north Utah is in some regards. It's basically in line with, it's further south, but it's in line as far as how far west you go with Calgary and Edmonton. And it's as far north as Colorado. And they're not in the southern end of Utah. Salt Lake is kind of mid or northern Utah, more or less. I've been to Utah, I've been to Salt Lake City, I've been to a little town called Ogden up there. Beautiful. And they like their winter sports. So I think this is a good fit. I think having hockey there, and people can say what they want. Hockey didn't work in the desert. it's still a goddamn desert. So, hockey's going to work in the desert. We just have to find the right cities in the desert. Just like I think Nebraska could probably someday have a hockey team. But we got to wait and see, right? Like, it's there's other cities maybe that deserve a team first. Mm-hmm. It wasn't Arizona that failed. It was ownership after ownership after ownership after ownership. So, anyways, I'm excited for Utah. I think that these young guys they're bringing in, some of the experienced guys that they're bringing in, I mean, they didn't make a huge splash in free agency, but they had lots of signings. And they were making trades like we talked about with Sergachev. I think they did good. I think Utah ends up on the winning side of free agency for the bar, where the bar was going in. Okay. Yeah, and the bar's been raised. Like, if you're a Utah fan, you're way more excited about your team than the Arizona fans.
Yeah. There's something to cheer for.
Yeah. There's something to cheer for. And there's finally no black cloud hanging over that franchise.
Yeah.
There's been a black cloud for 20 years or whatever, right? Like, I remember as a kid, Arizona felt pathetic.
Oh.
Like, it just was not. It had a couple of years with the screaming, dog on its chest, where they, under Gretzky and stuff, where there was some excitement. Gretzky's coaching,
Yeah, I remember that.
But they've never been exciting.
No.
The best thing about them in the last decade was they brought back the Kachina jerseys.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I'm going on a side tangent. We're talking about free agency, and I'm ripping on Arizona. But I think that Utah's a team that did all the right things.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, you don't need to go out and trade away all of your prospect pool and become, Nashville overnight. But you bring in depth pieces, you add guys, you make sure that you have the pieces in place that can evolve into the roles that you're asking them to be in.
And what they did in the draft, just a final piece on that, was amazing. And them picking Iginla's son.
Yes.
Quality.
Chef's kiss.
Chef's kiss is right.
I think that's a great piece. He just signed his entry contract just the other day.
And he's talented. He is talented.
And I wouldn't be surprised.
I think he was underrated because this could be, and maybe I'm speaking too early, I think this is one of those draft years that we look back on and say, holy crap, that guy was drafted in the second round? That guy was drafted at 30th? Yeah. Like, there's going to be guys that come out of this year's draft class, I think, that are superstars. Might not be a 2003, but it's going to be one of the better years for drafts. And I look at some of these names that teams took. I mean, Montreal got a steal. What position were they in the draft?
I think there was like
4?
Yeah, 4. Yeah.
And they got a guy that I don't think they expected to get because there was just so much high-end talent, right? Rolling around in this draft class. So we'll see how it plays out. But you bring a guy like Ty Iginla into your organization, you're getting an NHL pedigree player.
Yeah. You see his father, and
he knows how it works.
Exactly. He's born in the system.
Yeah.
It's like in wrestling, you've grown up in how it goes, how it works. And I feel like he's one of those players who can probably play similarly close to his father.
Guys with relatives in the NHL turn out to be better NHL players than they would be without that connection. That's a generalization. There are, obviously players that prove that wrong. Yeah. But generally speaking, if you have that connection, that's why, the Sutter family has been an NHL powerhouse for so long. Every couple of years, there's like a new Sutter cousin making it into the NHL. And they just, the family is a hockey family. And that's one of the reasons why Canadians tend to still dominate the sport. Yeah. But we're seeing a change. I mean, Team USA is looking better at international competitions.
I have a question for later to kind of bridge off of that.
So maybe we talk a little international hockey.
Yeah.
But let's try to focus on a couple more things for free agency, and then we'll talk a couple of winners and losers. So Utah and Nashville, Tampa Bay. We talked about Edmonton. We talked about Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. So our teams, teams that we like. And actually a player that I like. So Winnipeg and Toronto didn't do a lot in free agency.
No, I think, honestly, I had the Winnipeg list up here. I'm
going to pull it up myself.
I'm not saying I'm like real mad or sad about it, but it's just like it would have been great to see guys like Toffoli and Monahan stay. I don't know. It's been a lot of years of feeling the same. We're very much a bargain bin hunting team. Mm-hmm. Chevy builds a good team, but I'm just hoping we can move the needle a bit further than we have. Like, it's been a lot of years where the top guys have kind of stayed the same. Our goaltending's great.
Do you feel like you're wasting Hellbuck's years, like his prime years?
it's
He's 30, right?
starting to feel like that.
So
like,
how many more years does he have to not be a contender? You know what I mean? Like, or sorry, how many more years does he have until he is no longer the driving force in being a contender, right? I don't know that goalies make it past 35.
That's the thing. I was going to say, I buy and believe 3 or 4 more good years.
I would think for sure he's got 4 more years.
But we're about to hit like the peak of the peak, and then we're going to start sloping down. So, I mean, the time is now, and that's where I felt maybe that's where they should have moved. I mean, another thing that was kind of disappointing is Winnipeg had no first-round pick.
Yeah.
And they didn't move anything to make it happen, or this was a year where you could have. I mean, a second-round pick was good this year. There were good players in the second round, but there were players that might be on a roster in a year or two available late in the first round.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think this is where we're at. There's not much to say about Winnipeg. I don't know.
Probably not much more than Toronto. I mean, Toronto
hasn't really done much either.
The biggest questions are about if they make a move.
Yeah. Well, by the list here, and for me, I'm a big fan favorite of a little bit of these signings. So we signed Max Domi again. I'm a big fan of this. We need a little bit of
It was a good move.
Good move for us. I think the dollar is pretty safe. Maybe could have got a little bit lower on Max Domi, but I think he's a great player, a great addition to keep with Toronto. He fits well. Obviously, his father was a Toronto Maple Leaf. Timothy Lindgren, he's actually one of my favorite Leafs. Very underrated defenseman in the NHL. I'm very just defensive defenseman.
Feels like Leafs fans have been saying that for 5 years, though.
Yeah. He's just... Timothy just keeps it simple. And that's what a lot of defensemen doesn't do. You need to keep things simple.
So is he not an offensive guy?
He can move the puck if he really needs to, but he can really just put pucks on net. He can keep the puck away from the goaltender, which we've seen with Joseph Wall. He can.
So really could he be a Jacob Slavin type guy, like not fancy, but is going to make a lot of plays that are go under the radar?
Comparison with that, I think Jacob Slavin. You know, when we also signed Chris Tanev, that's your 1-2 punch on the defensive line with Morgan Riley. I'm liking the Chris Tanev move, but
I don't like the term on the Chris Tanev move.
Yeah, that's the only thing.
Like the dollar amount's good, like everything's fine for the type of player. It should have been a 2-year deal.
100% because of the age as well.
Like he's going to be 40 when that deal's over. He's not playing the last 4 years of that deal.
And we still have Mark Giordano.
Yeah, but he's making like league minimum, isn't he?
Yeah, he's also on long-term IR. I don't know if he's going to even return from that. Oliver Ekman-Larsson's another pickup. I think it's another solid one.
He's a guy that I think
younger.
I'm higher on. I've been talking to some friends, asking some opinions of some Leafs fans that aren't in this room, and a lot of people say that he's not the right guy. Like he was sheltered in Florida and stuff, but shelter him in Toronto. Like he still is a guy that can play in your power play at the very least.
We saw what he played in when he played for the Phoenix Coyotes at the time because he was traded for in the Arizona.
I mean, that was two trades or 2 buyouts. I don't know. He's been bought out since then. He's been moved since then.
He was really good when there were the Phoenix Coyotes when he was playing in the home in that area. Then they went to Florida. He again, like you said, he was sheltered a little bit. I don't think he's that star that we needed on the blue line.
He was a star 10 years ago. He's definitely a depth.
I think this is just something to fill because of a lot of the injuries we've been having on the blue line. Like we've seen that we picked up some guy from Dallas and he got injured game 1.
I actually like Hakanpää for you guys though.
That's another good one. We signed Matt Murray again on that league minimum.
That's just to be a third guy though.
Yeah, I think he's going to be sent down to the Marlies for a little bit for more development.
Now we've got you guys have Woll. You guys have Stollers and then Matt Murray. And Matt Murray is a guy that. I mean, I wouldn't hesitate to throw him into the odd NHL game. I just wouldn't want him starting half a season.
No. Yeah. And I think besides that, I think Toronto did decent. I'm not a super fan over
They did what they
decisions.
Could do.
Exactly.
Right. But the signings are good. I mean, they had to fix their D, so I do see some of those guys as good, like right-handed defensemen.
Yeah.
Philip Myers.
Yeah.
Hakanpää.
Yeah.
And Tanev.
Yeah.
Pretty as exciting. Well as Lilgren, right? So like those are right-handed D. Right-handed D are hard to find. So that I think that's some reason to be optimistic.
Yeah.
Does seem like Toronto's going to run it back. I did hear a little bit that maybe the Leafs are in talks with Carolina surrounding some sort of Marner-Natchez trade. So I would assume it would have to be Natchez plus, and Toronto would retain a little bit of salary. But I don't know. I have no idea,
Yeah.
really. And I think sometimes those things come out as they're just like, oh, there's 2 players that are being talked about in trade, so we should throw them into a trade rumor.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I think Toronto runs it back and
Yeah.
takes these depth pieces and says, does this put us over the line? I think their goaltending's better, and I think their defense is better. So they're a better team, at least on paper.
I think they're going to run it again. Just the way the team is, I don't think Marner's going to be leaving. Just to touch on that, I think they're going to run this one last time with this core and see what hopefully happens when we get past the first and the second round.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So I want to talk about a player, and then I want to talk about Carolina. So Jeff Skinner, former Carolina Hurricane, he's my boy. El Jefe, as I like to call him. He's the boss. He gets bought out of his $9 million contract in Buffalo, which, to be fair, I love Jeff Skinner. He was never worth $9 million. That was too much money. Sorry, Jeff, you're amazing. But it's just the expectations were high, right? So you're going to get bought out at some point with that deal.
Yeah.
He gets to go to a playoff team for the first time in his career. He gets traded from Carolina when Carolina's finally starting to make some changes and become a playoff team. He goes to Buffalo. Buffalo's supposed to be a playoff team. Every year we say, Buffalo could be a team this year. They could make the playoffs this year. And they don't.
Nope.
Now he's in Edmonton. He's worth $3 million a year. He can be a guy that you can throw in your top 6. You can play him in your bottom 6. You can put him on your power play. He doesn't play good defense, but if you shelter him and you give him the offensive opportunities with some of those studs out there that they have in Edmonton, holy moly, he could be a 40-goal scorer for $3 million a year. Yep. I love it. Jeff, go blow up Edmonton. All right, so Carolina, I know we probably don't have a lot of people that are Hurricanes fans, but they have been a team that's been monitored fairly closely the last couple of years under Rod Brind'Amour. They've made the playoffs. They've been a contender. They were the Vegas odds favorites going into the season and going into the playoffs to win the Stanley Cup, and they lost and didn't win. Yeah. That's bad enough, but then we blew it up. It looks like they're going to be a different team next year. And I don't know if you guys follow a lot of Hurricanes news, but there has been some pretty blunt honesty out of Rod Brind'Amour and Eric Tolsky, the new general manager, regarding why they weren't able to keep guys. And I'm going to be careful here because I don't want to throw any teams under the bus without knowing what definitely went on. But it does seem like every NHL team uses some back doors to talk to players they're not supposed to be talking to see if there's a fit. So it seems like what happened was a third party was used to go between Tampa Bay and Jake Gensel to figure out if there was a deal. Carolina spun their wheels on the Jake Gensel deal, so they took the week before free agency kind of lowballing him and saying, well, how about this? They finally came to the deal on what was it, like the Friday or whatever, just before the draft, and they said, okay, we'll meet you at 8x8 or whatever. And at that point, Jake's people apparently had already been talking, through others about what Tampa might be able to do for them. And Tampa basically had a little bit more money on the table. It's better, like there's no tax, like there's no state tax in Florida, things like that. So I think it was tempting for a guy like Jake Gensel that's sitting there and saying there's some uncertainty about what's going on. This team is maybe lowballing me a little bit. Take the deal and get out. So Carolina recovered a third-round pick. It sucks to see a guy like Jake Gensel go, especially when you needed the goal scoring. Yeah. But I think what hurts worse is we saw maybe 2 of our best defensemen leave. We saw Brady Shea exit. We saw Brett Pesce exit. Pesce goes to New Jersey. He went home. That's where he's from. He's from like upstate New York, somewhere around New Jersey area. So he went home. Brady Shea just took the best deal. Like Carolina was not going to offer 7x7 for Brady Shea, so he just went and got paid. And so basically Carolina spent the week before free agency focusing on Gensel, saying, sign Gensel first, and if we don't get him, then we'll circle back to our own guys. It was too late. By the time you did that, we lost out on Gensel. Yeah. All the guys that we would have circled back to had already basically found other matches or fits, or we're like, well, we're a day or 2 away from free agency. We might as well see what happens. So they're going to get more money in free agency. So Carolina messed up, and I think that it's a hard lesson for a new GM that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I think they had plans B and C and D and all that stuff, but everything kind of fell apart for them. So I think they're a playoff team. I know they're not a contender. They did a good job recouping some pieces, but there's still a massive question mark in their top 6. They need a goal-scoring winger. What do they do with Martin Necas? I mean, if you're watching this, you're probably thinking trade Necas to my team, and here's some scrubs, because they're even going to arbitration with Martin Necas, and that means that the water is going to be soured for sure. It's going to be, you almost never win when you go to arbitration, neither side, because it's the player has to say they're being cheap because X, Y, and Z, and the team has to say he's not worth that much money because of X, Y, and Z. So I'm interested to see what Carolina does. It feels like they need to make a massive trade. There's been talks about Ehlers maybe being available from Winnipeg. Do they make a trade? Is Ehlers any different a player than Martin Necas? I don't know. I think they're very similar.
Really be about new environments.
New environments, it would really be a swap out. I tend to think that Martin Necas plays the year with Carolina, and if he's going to be moved somewhere, he's moved at the trade deadline. So the window's closed for that. There's the guys that were on the market have now signed deals, so they're where they're going to be. So, anyways, I think that closes out free agency. I'm going to call the Hurricanes a loser on free agency. They didn't do horribly, but they definitely didn't get plan A or B accomplished. So they're on C or D at this point. Toronto, I think they win for where they're sitting at.
I think that's a win.
Winnipeg,
I'm gonna, I don't know, maybe.
You tell me what you think. I mean, I think it's a wash. I don't know if they won or lost.
I'd say we're just sitting at like a C, maybe a C plus.
Right.
We really didn't do much. I'd argue backup goaltending might be like a pinch better.
Yeah.
I'm really.
But how much do you use your backup goaltending when you have the reigning Vezina trophy?
That's the thing. I'm really just looking at the team like, okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, I think it's a wash in Winnipeg.
You guys picked up the same goalie like 7 times in the last 7 years.
We love
The
you,
best
Eric
part,
Comrie.
if anybody out there has the opportunity, you guys should just search for Eric Comrie's newest team photo that they edited so that we could see the first look of Eric Comrie in a Winnipeg Jets jersey.
Hey, they got a sense of humor. I'll give them that.
What I love, wasn't it him in a Jets jersey with they painted one over him?
Oh no, they took the Buffalo shot.
Oh, was it Buffalo? Okay.
Yeah.
The colors are similar enough that by his gear I couldn't tell, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So anyways, kind of cool that he's been there like, what, 10,000 times now?
I think there's. We're either on third or fourth time back.
Is that the most a player's ever?
I think so. I remember
Maybe.
before the pandemic, he was traded, and then within the same season, he was brought back because of the goaltending situations.
Yes.
And
Forgot
then,
about that.
And then at the end of the season, they let him go after, I think it was free agency, and then he signed to Buffalo, and then they just picked him back up again.
Look, I mean, as a Hurricanes fan, I've seen coaches be recycled. I've seen players on second and third tours of duty, so it happens.
Yeah.
But it's never a sign of confident moves for a winning team. I will say that.
Old trusty.
Running it back is like, for a guy that's on his third tour with the team. Like, if Carolina was like, oh, we want to bring back Paul Maurice as our coach, I'd be like, look, he's a great coach. He's a great guy. We've done it twice. We don't need to do it again. Like, even if he's the best there is right now, we've been there, done that.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
So anyways, lots of losers and only a few winners. Like, honestly, I think Nashville's a huge winner. I think Utah's, even though there was nothing massive, I think they're a big winner. Like, they also, like, they just got a bunch of money guaranteed by the city of Salt Lake to build a new arena district.
Yeah. First round at least. They still got a few more rounds to go.
But that's way further than Arizona made it.
By default, we're already in better shape.
So there are some teams out there that definitely had a good free agency. There are some teams like, I mean, if you're an Islanders fan, you're probably not too excited about what happened.
Yeah.
But if you're a New Jersey fan, you're probably like, I can't wait for October.
Yeah.
So it's all over the place. I can't wait to see how the season starts, because I think this season's going to be a fresh field. There's a lot of players that have been in the same place for a long time that have changed. So this happens every couple of years or every 10 years or so, where you see a bunch of players that have kind of been in one area, one team for their whole career, and now they're in new places. Mm-hmm. And so it's exciting to see a guy like Marchessault on a new team. It's exciting to see Stamkos on a new team.
Yeah.
How many times have hockey fans played NHL Name the Year and made a trade for Stamkos, right?
Yeah.
Specifically maybe in this year where he was a free agent and you could have gone and signed him in the game and been like, I got Steven Stamkos in free agency. So it'll be a cool season next year.
Yeah.
Let's move on to talk about the league as an entire entity. So I heard a few things the last couple of weeks, really since Arizona had the news that they basically lost. Well, they didn't lose. Morello gave up the rights to the franchise. That now maybe the NHL is considering expansion. So you don't have they would have almost had to expand with Arizona if Arizona came back into the league. They would have had to balance it out with another team. But now we might be looking at 2 new cities that have never had NHL teams, or revisiting an old city that has had an NHL team or two. Who gets a team? We've talked about this a little bit in the past, but I mean, if the league's going to expand now, they're at 32 good franchises. What cities do they look at and say, you and you?
So I'll mention a weird one that's come up recently that I don't know if this would be the right move, but New Orleans is coming up.
Whoa, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, New Orleans is starting to come
Do they have
up.
an arena?
They would probably, I'd assume, just go where the Pelicans play.
Yeah, they probably do what they did with the Delta Center, just some minor upgrades.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know how fit for hockey that is. And I'm not saying that's the market to go to, but it is coming up now. And it's an odd suggestion. I know Kansas City has been talked about a few times now.
Houston?
Yeah, Houston's definitely. I'd say Houston's probably at the top of the conversation
I think Houston is probably the easiest place to go to and say, this will probably work. It's a big city, a huge metro area. There's already hockey in Dallas.
And of course, I mean, I don't know if it would really happen, but we all know Quebec City has been floating out there for years.
It's never going to happen because the other owners want to make money, and Quebec City's not gonna you can sell the merchandise already in Quebec.
Yeah, that's the thing, and actually it's kind of interesting. I was listening to Bettman talk once about kind of the merchandise for some of these defunct teams. You pretty much, it's almost no different if they have the team or if they don't have the team. Whalers merch is going to sell without Hartford ever coming back, and Nordiques merchandise is going to sell without Quebec ever coming back.
They're good logos. They were beloved teams. And I mean, Carolina, definitely under Dundon, they're a team that doesn't mind making money. So they said, let's capitalize on the whole Whalers thing. There's lots of fans from the Northeast that are in North Carolina that have moved down there. So there's that connection, but also it's just a sick jersey. So sell it. Make it available to people.
Well, and as we can see here, I mean, it's an iconic logo. Love the logo, but Hartford, just to spoil this, they're not getting a team.
Never.
Ever.
It's
they're
never happened.
Way too small.
To be clear, one of the reasons they moved out of Hartford was because they played in a shopping mall.
Yeah, they're just not big enough. But I guess going back to the what ifs, I mean, what's kind of hilarious, but also serious at the same time, is the talks of that second Toronto team.
I was going to mention that. I heard a few talks
Here's
about
the issue,
it.
right? I think hockey fans want it because there's maybe a thirst for an alternative in Toronto.
Yeah.
And you would sell just as much merch for the Leafs as but the issue is that that's a geographic territory that's locked down by an ownership group. And that ownership group is going to say, this is ours, and we do not share. Just like if a team wanted to go to South Carolina, it's not big enough. The Hurricanes would say, there's no way.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And I mean, you might even see a team like Carolina claim Georgia. If the NHL wanted to go back to Atlanta, you might see a team like Carolina say, wait a second. We're selling more merch down there now since you guys left, and why should we give that up? Probably not, but there's always an argument to be made that you're taking away from my revenue, so why should I share?
I think to throw a bit of a flag on that, though, is when you look at the tri-state area, I mean, that's 2 New York teams that are really close, and New Jersey is super close to that. And even in basketball, I can actually speak a bit more because I like the Nets personally. And the Nets were an ABA team that were in New York, but actually the Knicks, when they formed the ABA into the NBA, didn't want another New York team. They went to New Jersey. But it ended up being, with time, because time can heal wounds, the NBA actually allowed it where another team could enter the New York market. I mean, we're talking... The Brooklyn Nets and the New York Knicks are really close together. They allowed that, but it wasn't allowed at one point.
So
I could see Toronto, especially knowing hockey market, being able to justify the two-team approach, because I think the alternative is needed. No different than the Nets and the Clippers. Those are the examples I think of as those are the secondary teams that have built up strong.
But the Clippers
fan
were there
bases.
before. The Clippers existed before the Lakers came to LA, did they not?
No, so the Clippers would have been originally in San Diego. Essentially, Lakers would have
They were
moved
a
from
California team.
Minneapolis in the 60s, and the Clippers would have came to Los Angeles early 80s. I think it was 83, 84.
But San Diego's in California.
Yeah, there is that proximity, of course, but I still think the template of how that works still is there. And I mean, look at what the Clippers have done now. The facility they have is better than the primary team.
So I'm going to throw a flag back on the play.
Okay.
The tri-state area has 23.6 million people living in it. As of the tri-state
no, it is.
as of 2020. So it's bigger than that. Do you know what the population of the Golden Horseshoe is? So the Golden Horseshoe would be like your Hamilton and like Kitchener, Waterloo, and all the other parts of GTA that kind of aren't Toronto.
No.
7.8.
Different numbers, but
Different numbers? We're talking about one is the size of a country.
yes.
And one is the size
obviously,
of a city.
It's Canada. Our population is different. I mean, I was just
Right, and it's
talking
already more expensive to
the
run
other
an
day,
NHL
state
team.
of California population versus that, but I still think the support would be there.
Yes, the fans would be there, but it's about room to grow the brand, and the NHL is a business. It is 100% about the owners making money. It is 100% not about what will make fans happy. So it only is about fans when those two things overlap, right?
Yeah.
So no way that MLSE lets any other team anywhere near Southern Ontario. And the reason for that is the same reason why when Jim Belsilli from Blackberry wanted to buy, what was it, Arizona, and move it to, or he was talking about a bunch of teams. Like there was New Jersey, there was Nashville, Carolina, maybe Arizona at the time, where he was like, I'll buy any of them and move them. He wanted to put a team in like Waterloo, Hamilton area. Like he wanted a Hamilton hockey team. And it was vetoed then. And I don't think anything's changed. Like the ownerships haven't changed. If anything, ownership has become more ingrained. So we live in an era where in the 60s, people would justify, LA's growing so fast and there's so much money to be made, put in two teams.
Yeah.
But I don't think Toronto's growing at that fast of a rate to justify a second team from a business perspective. I think the NHL will always veto that until they get to the point where maybe Toronto is once again like a booming world-class city. I mean, it's a world-class city. I'm sorry, Toronto. But you're not the New York tri-state area. Like, you're just not that big. It's Canada.
Now, moving away from the cities, though, I guess there are some other logistics things. Now, think about this. NFL has 32 teams.
Yeah.
MLB and NBA only are at 30 still. It's really odd for me to hear the NHL already talking to go to 34. I don't think it makes sense to get to that number.
Is it the NHL talking about it, or is it fans being excited?
I think it's a mix.
Both, but I don't think the NHL is in expansion mode yet. And they've said that. Like, they've come out and said, we're not currently in expansion mode. But I think they're gearing up for that next round of expansion. Yeah. They might be waiting on the MLB to make an expansion move and see what happens. They might be waiting on the NBA to choose a new city and make a move, because the NHL has been the mover and shaker. They chose Vegas. They got into Vegas first. They're back in Seattle really before, like, the NBA's not there. So most other sports there, but they got there before the NBA. So maybe they're sitting back and they're saying, okay, we've invested a lot of money. Let's wait and see what makes sense. But I also think they're probably looking at it and saying, okay, we can't expand today, but in the next 10 years, we definitely are going to have a window for expansion. And they're starting to plan for that. And one of the issues is, how do you have a 34 or 36 team league and make the scheduling work?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think there's a lot of logistics that, when I think big picture, I really think cap it at 32. And I'd say no different. Looking at, I guess, comparing other leagues, MLB currently is more interested in relocation scenarios.
They got one or two options for relocation.
Yeah, where NBA, I know, they're probably going to have two teams within the next year or two.
Yeah. I think, for me, it's not so much about 34 teams. I think, and there's probably some mathematicians out there that can figure this out better than me, but I think at 36 teams, the scheduling gets easier again.
Yeah.
And it has to do with the NHL PA won't want to go much beyond 84 games. Hockey's a grind. If you go much beyond 82, 84 games, you're going to have guys that only play parts of seasons, right? Which is, you don't want it to become the NFL.
Exactly.
And they only have, 16 games? Or they're trying to get to 16 games?
Yeah, they're about to push to that. They're trying to eliminate preseason.
Right, and I actually agree with that. Get rid of preseason in the NFL because the season is already so short, giving games that matter. But in hockey, there's a reason they do 82 because it's hard on the body. I mean, it's in basketball. We already see a lot of guys like Kawhi Leonard hasn't played a full season. I don't think his entire career.
Yeah.
So, and there's a reason. I mean, he has health concerns, knee issues, whatever. So, come playoff time, you want the best version of Kawhi, not the Kawhi that's gone through 82 games.
Yeah.
But then it brings into question like the whole Kucherov and Mark Stone issues in the NHL, and are you just opening up the door for more of that without closing that loophole? So I don't know. I mean, expansion's interesting. I think we all talk about it and want to talk about it because it's exciting. Like, it's exciting to see a new team, to see a new logo, a new brand, all of that stuff. And in some ways, we get kind of attached to those new things. Like, kids that are really young right now are going to find Vegas a really exciting team for a long time because they're new and they're exciting and it's a cool team. They're good. They're bringing in players. Kind of like when I was a kid, Anaheim was like a team that people were like, Anaheim's so awesome because the branding was cool. It had a movie series behind it and all that stuff, and then a cartoon as well. So I don't know. I think the NHL is looking at it. I think they will go eventually to 34 teams. I think it will be very hard for them to hold at 34 teams, and I think eventually the league comes back down to 32. Economics being what they are, I don't know that there are 36 teams in North America or 36 cities in North America that can sustain professional hockey permanently. So you put a team in Atlanta again. How long is it until Atlanta loses their third franchise? Right?
Yeah.
So I have a hypothetical question which I was saving for a topic similar to this. And I just want a yes or no. We can have details on this on a further day. So we talked about expansion with, of course, Kansas City, potentially Toronto, another GTA team. Since we're here in the Maritimes, this is a yes or no question.
I know my answer already. I don't even know the question, but I know my answer.
So I'm just going to throw it out. We have multi-billion-dollar owner, new arena. Let's say it's like the Videotron Center in Quebec City. Not an expansion. It's an expansion team. We're not bringing a team over. Do you think the Maritimes, it could be any city, it could be Halifax, it could be whatever, can have an NHL team and represent it as the Maritime team? Not just a Halifax location, not a Moncton location, not a St. John, Newfoundland location.
So what, they just rotate through all these different cities?
No, just one main sub. It's not called like the Halifax. It's not called Moncton. It's not called St. John. It's called the Atlantic X, Maritime X team.
That's what the CFL had in mind.
There are shuttles. There's a reason for it. It's a yes or no. We'll get back to it another time. Thumbs down?
I mean, I'm just going to throw this out there. There's less than 2 million people that live in the Maritimes.
Maritime, yeah, 100%.
I say yes in 12 years.
Okay.
12 years?
Okay.
Not 10, not 15.
So we'll save the footage. I think
That's for rookies.
I think future now, no. Like for now, no.
Yeah, no,
for the future,
no.
potentially. And this is what would be a great topic to talk about in the future.
I don't want to get into politics on a hockey podcast, but there would have to be a lot of change in this part of the country to make something like this viable for a business owner to come in.
And this was one of my great hypothetical questions because this is a whole different podcast to talk about it. I love
That's probably a whole episode. We could do an hour and a half of just that.
We might get there. We'll see.
That's something I wanted to throw up out of the three.
I would love to take sides. Like Daniel, you say you take the yes side, I'll take the no side, and we just hammer. Because I really don't think that ever happens. But anyway.
That's another episode potential in the near future. We want to know
I'll
your
say a quick
taste.
extension that won't go into depth. Maybe AHL.
Oh yeah, I could see a lower league team coming in. We used to have an AHL team.
Exactly.
There was multiple at one point.
Yes, I mean St. John
sense.
and Halifax. I think Fredericton even had an AHL team.
Cape
Breton had one.
So I am all for something like that. I don't think an NHL team has to make a certain amount of money to be viable. The league doesn't want to subsidize it. But look, if you're from Atlantic Canada, which I hope a lot of our fans are from the Maritimes, if we have fans, outside of like our wives and girlfriends and things. But yeah, I mean, if you're from Canada, even just let us know. Like, would you want to see a team in your area of Canada? Because I think Canadian fans are really the ones that are like, what about our city? And if if it was just about having the fans and filling the arena, Halifax, St. John's, Kitchener, Waterloo, Hamilton, Manitoba.
Well,
like
I remember reading up on Saskatoon almost getting the Blues in the 80s.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, look, there would be a team in every province if it was just about filling an arena, because you could get 20,000 people out on any given night in any Canadian city of a decent size to watch a professional hockey game. The tickets would have to be more expensive, but you would get the fans out for it. It's not about that. Yeah. It's about merch sales. It's about having enough people to continue to grow the brand. So I want to revisit that. That's a good hypothetical. Yeah. I'm gonna throw one or two more hypotheticals out before we call it. So this is kind of we'll go like a rapid fire session here at the end. Okay. Welcome to the chaos of live, everybody. So international hockey. All right. What I want to hear is Four Nations coming up, right? We have the Four Nations Cup or whatever they've called it. A little bit silly, but I'm kind of excited to see jerseys and stuff for it, because this is an opportunity maybe to see some new designs and things. Yeah. So we have Sweden, Finland, Canada, and the USA. Who wins the Four Nations?
If it's not Canada, let me just put that out there. If it's not Canada, obviously I don't want the Americans to win. But I love my Swedes.
Fair enough.
I love my Swedes. I think if you take a look at that lineup, the Swedes are a good one. Finns, another great team. They're all great teams, to be honest with you.
Well, they choose the four best hockey nations in the world, and they had to exclude Russia. So,
if you take a look, pen and paper, they're all great teams. But I love my Swedes. I love my Finns, but I have to go with my Swedes if it's not Canada.
Yeah, I'd say gut says Canada. If I'm going anybody non-Canada, probably U.S.
Okay, I'm going to throw a total curve. My gut tells me this is the USA's time to shine. They're going to win a lot of international hockey coming up. I think Canada might even get third in this tournament. Whoa. Who's playing goalie for us? No. I think Finland gets second. And if it's not the USA Finland getting gold, I think Finland might win the whole thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, love Finland.
And I'm a little biased. I mean, you see this. I think Carolina's known. We might have lost one of our Finns this offseason in Turbo, but we got a lot of Finns. Yeah. And Sebastian Aho's already on that squad. And Aho is, he's a horse. He just wants to work, and he wants to win, and he wants to play hockey. So I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, those Four Nations, I think it's great. I loved it when they did the North America team at one point.
Yes.
The
Young Guns was
awesome. Best teams ever assembled.
It was one of the most fun team ever assembled. Exactly. It was the best jerseys. I love the.
There was Austin Matthews. There was Jack Eichel on the same team. Connor McDavid, was it?
Yeah. So do we see another World Cup of hockey? Is this rolling into maybe being able to do a World Cup of hockey?
This was my hypothetical question. I like to touch on this from the Four Nations. Now, this is the World Championships. Let's say the best of the best. We're not doing countries. We're doing the best pro hockey team in the world. You have the NHL, the Stanley Cup champions, so let's say the Florida Panthers. The KHL, hypothetical, we're probably not going to have them in it. Yeah. The KHL against them, Florida Panthers. The SHL, the DEL, or the Swiss.
We need to do
one bid. It is like the International Cup.
No.
They play single kind of round robin. Winner is the best professional hockey team in 5 years.
Or maybe
every year. So then whatever the NHL team is the best team every year.
It'd be once a year every 5 years.
If you're doing that, you know what you have to do? You would have to say every so many years,
every 5
the
to 3 years.
Stanley Cup is up for grabs. So there's a Stanley Cup champion, right? But this year, every 5th year, the person who would have been Cup champion goes to an international tournament and plays, and we play for the Cup, and the Cup is up for grabs. That's never going to happen. The NHL owns the Cup, so they're never going to give it out to a KHL team. Yeah. But also, the NHL team's going to win every time. Well, they're going to whoop them.
Well, we got to remember when they did the European tour, they went to, I think it was Sweden or Finland.
Yeah, they do it almost every preseason.
An NHL team has lost a few times to a European team.
In preseason games, with preseason rosters. With teams in preseason mode. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm taking a hard stance on this. That would be the worst international tournament.
I would love it.
I would love to see
other competition.
Let us know.
You would see new people. I think I love it.
If you're watching on YouTube, put it in the comments. If you're on Spotify, I don't know, tag us on Instagram or Twitter or something and let us know. Because I think that's ridiculous. I nobody's going to want it's the Spangler Cup, but worse.
No. I think it'd be better than the Spangler Cup.
I think it would be better, but barely.
No, it would be more exciting.
Oh, no.
just imagine, like, let's say the Carolina Hurricanes is playing the best top team, the Munich Red Bulls, and this World Championship.
The fact that could happen.
Home city.
So the Carolina Hurricanes stomp. So it's just an NHL. Like, he's just gonna have the NHL stomping all over the other teams.
I don't think that's gonna be the case.
You will for that big of a deal in that environment. Yeah, it's not preseason hockey, man. We're talking. There's something on the line. Yep. The NHL team's gonna win 9 out of 10 of those tournaments.
Okay.
We'll see.
Maybe that's a topic for another day. But
that'd be fun.
That's 2 hypothetical questions. I got everybody going. But
even the KHL, which is the second best hockey league in the world, professional hockey league in the world, stands no chance.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I guess it depends on the club.
Like, what is it, Dynamo Moscow or whatever? Like, one of the big teams there. Even they would have not a chance. They wouldn't even.
Not try?
It would be a 7-2 goal game. It would not be fun to watch.
It.
No,
I'd be down. I'd be betting.
Worst case scenario, you get 2 or 3 years in.
I would rather watch Latvia versus Japan at the Olympics.
I'd rather see this.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you guys have to let us know what's your stance.
Moving forward, that'll be a topic for another rainy day.
Yeah.
That was hypothetical question.
What a terrible.
I have one more.
What a terrible idea.
I think we're going to be talking about the Olympics in just a
Just
moment.
for bringing that up, I'm pretty sure you have to buy me a beer. Like, I need the taste of that idea out of my mouth. Hit me with your hypothetical. What else?
The last one, I think we're going to be talking about the Olympics in just a second. Now, we want to talk about Hockey Canada just for a brief moment. Now, goaltending in Canada, you've mentioned it. Who will be playing nets in goaltending? I'm noticing as a former goaltender that the development in Canada has been god-awful.
Oh, we haven't had development of goaltenders since Marc-Andre Fleury made the NHL.
Exactly.
It's been a bit.
Where do you guys see the development in goaltending history of Hockey Canada going in the next 5 years?
So this is actually, when I put Olympics on the list, this is what I wanted to talk about myself. Yeah. So we can consolidate. This is perfect.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in on this first. Goaltending needs to be a priority in this country if we care about hockey. Look, if you're a parent out there right now and you're looking at putting your kid in hockey and your kid has an interest in goaltending and you have the ability to buy the gear, it's expensive, right?
Yeah.
Do it. Support them. And help them stick with it. It is not fun for the first couple of years to be a goaltender.
It's not.
It is hard. You are not coordinated enough. You don't have the skills. But it is the most undervalued position in hockey, I think. I was a goalie at a young age, and then I wanted more ice time. I didn't want to play in every other game or every third game. I wanted to play in every game, so I became a defenseman. And it can be a hard grind to be a young goalie coming up. But stick with it, please. If you're a goalie out there, stick with it. Like, as a kid, I would read books. I would play ball hockey, roller hockey, street hockey, ice hockey, and I always wanted to be a goalie. So I say this to look at kind of our stock, and I think the CHL is the best place to look for goaltending development.
Yeah.
We used to have goalies going into the CHL that were Marc-Andre Fleury caliber.
Yeah.
We used to have J.S. Giguère caliber goaltenders in the CHL. And more, what I see happening look, Canada's a big country, so a lot's going on. But I think more and more people are like, it's expensive and it's less exciting to be a goaltender, so they become a defenseman or a forward or whatever. And so they're not playing goal. And so a lot of young kids aren't taking the opportunity. So there's a lot of guys, like Jacob Slavin's American, but I mean, that's a guy, just watch him on the ice. He could be a goaltender. He has a coordination. He stopped more pucks with his legs than Kevin Weeks stopped in his entire career with goalie pads. But he's a defenseman, right?
Yeah.
So, like, how many guys could be goalies in the NHL that aren't because it was too expensive or it wasn't exciting enough? Like, who wants to play in every other game if you're 10 years old? Do you want to play in every game?
Yeah, exactly. I think with the touch with the CHL there, you take a look at the CHL now, they're a lot smaller than what I'm used to. I'm 6'1". I'll just be just under an NHL regulation goaltender. You take a look at a guy of William Rousseau and then Matthias Rousseau. Matthias is the goaltender of the Halifax Mooseheads. He is 5'11". And we have Soros is 5'10"? 5'10"-ish. So That's a small goaltender market that we have in Canada. I think the biggest goaltender I've ever seen come out of the Quebec Major Junior within the last 7 years is Eric Brassard. I think it was 6'7". Didn't end up playing a big pro career, but outstanding. He's done so much. He played for the St. Mary's Huskies for a brief time. Great guy, actually a great buddy of mine as well.
Saros is 5'11". Sorry, yeah. Saros, we took an inch off you.
And then we also have another goaltender, Anton Bibeau. He was drafted to the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was a half decent sized goaltender, Memorial Cup winning trophy winner, and just never seen a thought of day.
So I see Canadian goaltending went from the best in the world, specifically Quebec. I don't know what happened in Quebec, but they used to produce the best goalies in the world. To now every Canadian goalie is like a Justin Pogge. Like they can play at the junior level, maybe at the international level, like U16, U18, but they get to the NHL and they're lit up, they're whooped, they're not big enough, they don't have the reflexes, whatever it is. I think hockey in Canada is losing a little bit of its shine. Yeah, like
it's touch. I think player-wise, we're done pretty well.
But overall, we don't produce as many good hockey players as we used to that go to the NHL. And part of it is growing the game in the States and things like that as well.
Definitely.
But when I look, I mean, if you're a, and this is going to overlap with politics a little bit, but if you're just a middle class family in Canada, maybe you can't afford hockey for your 3 kids anymore, so they don't play hockey. They play soccer because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Or they play basketball because it's a pair of shorts. You know what I mean? And I'm saying that, I'm expecting my first kid. So if there's parents out there that are like, no, you're wrong. Like, this is how we make it work. And let us know how you do it, because I think there's lots of families that struggle to make hockey a priority when it is the most expensive sport to play.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can say as a parent of 2, my daughter's actually starting to get interested in hockey. And the biggest thing I think I'm fearing is the amount of costs associated with it. My son seems to be getting into sports too, but he's leaning more towards like soccer, football, things like that. And I'm like, man, it's almost a relief when you hear that, because it's a cost thing.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, man, buying football pads is a lot cheaper than buying a set of hockey equipment.
Yeah, you can find a lot of
the
stuff.
travel for soccer, because there's, soccer fields everywhere, and you can travel locally or play at the same field every week.
When we just walk to a field nearby, it's super easy to pick up. And
exactly.
If you're playing hockey, you're playing ice hockey, it's not renting a field. It's renting a building that has the equipment to keep ice cold year round.
Yeah.
So the cost of playing hockey, I know, even when I was a kid, I couldn't have played goalie because the cost was so prohibitive that I would have had gear from 30 years ago just to be able, just to be able to play, but it was a little bit cheaper to be a defenseman. So at a certain point, I was like, all right, between not playing enough and, the cost on my parents and stuff like that, be like, well, we can't buy you new gear this year.
Yeah.
Fine. Well, if I'm a skater, I can get new gloves this year because it's,
I'm kind of blessed that I actually had family who played in, the East Coast Hockey League.
Yeah.
My cousin, he played in the NHL for a little bit. So I have a lot of hand-me-downs, but some families don't have that opportunity.
Sure.
I played very high. I have goaltending pads still to this day. That's PEI Rockets, because my cousin was a star player there. And I was like, thank you, Ben. But we got to think about it the other way. Quebec system ain't working. Ontario system doesn't have goalies. But what's been Edmonton lately? A lot of great goaltenders coming out. Stuart Skinner.
The last generation of great Canadian goalies came from the West.
Yeah. And that's another.
I mean, I'm going to throw Cam Ward in there as a Hurricane fan.
Yeah.
He got the raw end of playing on a really bad Hurricanes team for most of his career. But, I mean, he would have been Team Canada material more often in his career on a better team, and he's from Edmonton.
Yeah, I find goaltending in just Canada development has gone down. Me as a former goalie coach for minor hockey, it has gone down dramatically, especially in Quebec, which is very surprising. And those Western boys, they're a big motherfuckers, excuse my French, but they are big boys. Take a look at Stuart Skinner, take a look at all the Western goalies.
You got to be a big boy now to be a goalie.
They are big boys.
Which is why, I mean, we used to see waves of goalies. You'd see a wave from maybe Eastern Europe, and then you might see a wave from Canada, a wave from the US, a wave from Russia.
Yeah.
Now you see a lot of Finnish goalies. See some Swedish goalies.
Yeah.
You see a lot of Russian goalies.
Yeah.
Russia is producing goalies.
Yeah, their system.
I don't know what they're doing. I mean, if you're a scout out there or something, I doubt we have scouts watching us. But if you have any experience with that, if you know some people that came from Russia, you played with Russians or something, because lots of people move to Canada. Why is it? Why is that Russians produce the best goalies currently in the NHL? I don't know, but goaltending is an issue. I mean, we're talking about the Olympics, so to kind of tie the whole thing back together, it's absurd to me to think that like we would think Canada has a chance at winning a gold medal when we don't have a goalie that can win a gold medal.
Yeah, I can probably
don't even
name
have
3, but they'd probably not even win us again Dan medal if you take
When
a look
you
at
look
Bennington,
at the other
Stuart
goalies,
Skinner.
though, look at the other goalies. Like Stuart Skinner's probably our starting goalie. If the Olympics started today, it's probably Stuart Skinner.
Stuart Skinner, backup's probably Jordan Bennington.
I don't know who else it would be from Canada.
And Fleury's probably on the third pipe. But
He's
that's
41.
That's it. That's the only things I can name.
I'm
And
sorry, I
you
forgot
take
how
a
old
look
he is,
at-
but he's 40.
If you take a look at the U.S., you can probably name so many goaltenders. Connor Hellebuck. You can have Gibson on that back end. Take a look at Russia. You have right there Bobrovsky and Vasilevsky. Sweden.
And then you've got guys that are, I mean, you still have like 20 goalies that are rushing beyond that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You know,
Fleury's 39.
Yeah, so we don't have many goaltenders in the
Even
Canadian
Finland
system.
has UC Saros.
Exactly, and they have a few others that play in the
And there's got to be a guy or two that we're not thinking of. And isn't Jacob Markstrom is Swedish?
Yes, he is Swedish.
I mean, like there's good goalies in the NHL. None of them, like none of the top caliber goalies outside of currently Stuart Skinner, who just helped his team get to the Cup Finals and get to a Game 7. Outside of him, and I don't put him in the same league as Hellbuck.
No, and
Or Bobrovsky. I don't put him
Honor
in the same
mentioned
league.
at Aiden Hill, he just recently won a Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights, but again, inconsistent, not very healthy.
So anytime I've watched international hockey over the years, Team Canada at the junior level specifically, like the World Junior Championship and stuff, they've done the worst when they've had the worst goaltending.
Yeah.
Right? And it's one of those positions that you can have a great team in front of you. But if soft goals are going in at the international level, like everybody can score that's at that tournament.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Olympics, the World Juniors, like everybody can score.
Yeah.
That's not the concern. And their defense all sucks, right? Like they're young guys, so their defense is mediocre. Still better than me, but still mediocre. And so the goalies are hung out to dry. I mean, it's hard when you're a young goalie, and I think we've also made it so that it's like it's harder to be a goalie today than ever before. Like the gear's smaller.
Yeah.
The game is faster, more physical. So if you're not a 6'5" behemoth that also has like the reflexes of a cat, you're not built to be a goalie. So there's lots of guys that, you know, if you're a UC Saros size guy, if you're my size, I'm 6 foot, and you want to be a goalie, you're not going to be drafted. I'm sorry, you're too small.
That's correct.
You know, there's no more Artur Zerbe. There's no more 5'8", 5'11" guys, except for the UC Saros of the world that is a rarity. Like they're all becoming bigger, and teams are not drafting small goalies. They're drafting big guys, and hopefully it turns into something.
Because every goal in the league now is a hybrid. There's no such thing as a butterfly goaltender. Well, there's still one around, Jonathan Quick, but you get those one stand-ups, but Jonathan Quick is still pretty hybrid in my eyes. He can move up, he can move down, but every goaltender in the NHL, about 98% of them is a hybrid.
Now, 20 years ago, 98% were butterfly goaltenders.
Butterflies, and then you get the odd stand-up with Brodeur.
Or like Dominic Hasek was definitely a stand-up guy.
Yeah.
Artur Zerbe was a stand-up goalie, but he had the splits to go into the butterfly and stuff.
They were prepared.
But, you know, I think guys like, what's his face from Boston several years ago, the old man.
Tim Thomas,
thank you. He changed the game for goalies, because if you're not large and athletic, you don't have as much of an opportunity to break into the league. So, look, I have very low expectations for Canada at the 2026 Olympics. I'm concerned that we are nowhere near deep enough to compete with the likes. Like, if Russia's there, that's a scary team. The USA is stacked. They've got the best team in the world, and I don't think Canada today, I don't think we're developing the hockey players that we need to be that competitive. And it starts at a young age. We've taken hitting out of the game, and you know, I've had my fair share of concussions at a young age, so I don't want kids to go through that. But you still have to let kids play the sport the way the sport's designed. And if you're going to get a lot of concussions, unfortunately, hockey's not going to be for you, and that's just the way it is. Just like if you're a football player, and you know, it's tackle football at a certain age. If you get a few concussions, you can't do that sport anymore. It's just how it is. But we have to let kids play hockey. We have to be tough on them. I think we've had really a softening of coaching. Like, it's more about, and people are going to rip me for this online, but it's a lot more about having fun maybe than it is about wanting to make the better team. Like, I think there's maybe less of an emphasis on sport in this country than there was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I think that's normal. I think a lot more people are more interested in video games and stuff like that takes them away from it. So, you know, we'll deal with it. It'll come in waves. Hopefully we'll come back around and be a country that produces top-notch goalies again. Because we produce Connor McDavid. We produce Sidney Crosby, Nathan
Yeah.
McKinnon, Brad Marchand. All three of those guys are from the city that we're sitting in right now. So we know we can do that, but what happened to the Marc-Andre Fleury's? What happened to the Cam Wards? What happened to the Martin Brodeurs and the Carey Prices of the world?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, whatever's in the water in Western Canada, you're doing all right for yourself.
Oil. It's just oil.
It's the oil in the blood.
So, anyways, I think that wraps it up for us, guys.
That pretty much wraps it up, everyone. So I appreciate this is our episode 3 here. I did a mix for a warm up. So I appreciate the feedback on that. Actually, that was one of our highest viewed things that I've actually made. Out of the blue.
Saw that.
So thank you for that. Thank you for our sponsor, Full of Taste, for sponsoring for this video. We'll be back again in another public atmosphere. We hope to do that very shortly, but it is cost effective, of course. So thank you guys for listening here on YouTube and on Spotify. We'll hope to move this to Apple Music very shortly, or Apple Podcasts, as I think they're called. So,
throw us a like, a subscribe, follow, whatever it is, wherever you're finding this. And if you're on YouTube, just listen for as long as you can. It'll help. Yep. Give us a comment, anything to kind of support it, and yell at us. Tell us how dumb some of our takes are. Yeah. Or if you're like me, help me tell them how dumb their take on that silly international tournament is.
Yeah.
So thanks, everybody. This is Matt,
Ethan,
Daniel,
and we'll see you guys next time.
Catch you next time.